Mm. Hey, everybody. Sorry about that. A couple minutes late because the pizza got here right as we were supposed to go live, and I was starving. So I hurry up and scarf down a piece of pizza. Uh, I hope you don't mind. Sorry about that. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about recruiting in the military. We're going to be talking about um, the about women in combat roles, and we're going to be taking a look at a CNN piece that laments the fact that a woman who is not a Navy SEAL was not given command of the Navy SEALs. And we're going to see what you think about that. So I'd love it if you would put where you're watching from in the chat over here. And I'm keeping an eye on that. And if you have questions or comments, feel free to put them over there. That's what it's for. And it's one of the most popular things about our podcast is that we actually interact with you on those things. And sometimes that gets difficult because there's a lot of people online. But anyway, uh, today's sponsor is going to be Brightcore Nutrition. I'm here in Yerevan, Armenia today. So I just went from the flight went from Panama to Costa Rica to Frankfurt. I did my live yesterday from Frankfurt, and then we got on the plane and flew to Armenia. We've been in Yerevan all day. It's about 8 o'clock at night here now, 9 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time. So that's why I'm eating dinner. But the one thing that I've noticed being here late fall, early winter, it's actually been a pretty nice day outside, but the air quality has been terrible, unbelievably bad. I don't think I've ever been anywhere in my life that had air quality this bad that there wasn't a forest fire going on next door or something. And I don't know why exactly, but I mean it's making my eyes water when I go outside here. So it's got me thinking about Kimchi One because this product from Brightcore Nutrition is supposed to pull all of the toxins out of your body. It's an all natural product, and I've got a special uh, thing at the end for you. So I want you to stick around till the end today because I did an interview with the CEO of Brightcore about Kimchi One, and I think you're going to want to hear that. If you haven't seen it, you definitely want to see that interview, and it'll be playing just after I finish today's live. So with that, without any further ado, uh, let's get to talking about the article that came out, and I've got a screenshot of it here. This is in CNN, and CNN exclusive. She was the best man for the job. Excess policies are pushing qualified women out of the military. Now, before I get started, I have to point out that this article was written by somebody who has never served in the military. Her name is Haley Britsky, and she writes for CNN, covers military affairs and the Pentagon and that sort of thing. She's probably not 30 years old. If she's 30, I'd be surprised. And looking at her reporting, it's evident that she is coming at this with a very left leaning agenda. Uh, she's, uh, again, I'm going to go through this article kind of point by point here and show you how what I mean by that, what I mean by that agenda. Okay, so let me just start reading the article at the beginning, and I'll comment on it. She says everything was set for the Navy officer to take over a new role that would have capped an already distinguished career and made her the first woman in Naval Special Warfare Command overseeing Navy SEALs. Ranked the top officer for promotion in her cohort, she received a Purple Heart after being injured in an IED attack during a combat tour in Iraq. She then became the first woman to serve with SEAL Team 6 in the role of troop commander, one of several senior positions within the squadrons that make up the elite naval unit. Okay, so let's go back and talk about this. First of all, the fact that she was ranked the top officer for promotion in her cohort uh, could potentially, and I would say very likely, tells us more about the people doing the selecting than it does about the qualifications of the people being selected. And I say that simply because we know for a fact that during starting in the Obama administration and all the way up until the new Trump administration, including the first Trump administration and Joe Biden's administration, the the military was refocused during that time period, not on lethality, not on winning wars, but on political correctness and on equity. Equity not meaning everybody has an equal shot. Equity means everybody gets an equal outcome, no matter where they start from. So you could not get promoted in the U.S. military above the rank of about captain if you did not kiss the woke ring. And I've reported extensively on that for many years. This was part and parcel of being an officer in the U.S. military. Is you had to be all in on the white fragility and DEI and all that sort of thing. So the fact that she was considered the top officer for promotion in her cohort likely tells us that the people who were making that determination were looking at, number one, her gender, because they wanted a woman to be leading Naval Special Warfare Command. Now, how can I say that? How can I say that she wasn't uh, qualified in every other way to lead the Navy SEALs? Well, I can tell you one thing for certain that we know for sure, and that is that this woman never went to BUD/S and never graduated as a Navy SEAL. So although she had been put into command positions within the Navy SEALs, even within the most elite Navy SEAL unit, SEAL Team 6, that that just tells us more about the priorities of the U.S. military during that time period. And we know for a fact that she is not a Navy SEAL. So how much sense, you tell me, how much sense does it make to take somebody who has never been a police officer and make them the police chief of even a small town? How much sense does it make to take a woman who is not a qualified Navy SEAL and put her in charge of all of the qualified Navy SEALs? Look, I'm not saying a thing about her plumbing here. I could care less about her gender. What I'm more concerned about is the fact that she is supposed to have been put into a leadership position, leading people who she can't relate to a great extent because she has not been through the same things herself. But that's not the way this is written. She goes on in the article to say, well, she received a Purple Heart after being injured in an IED attack. Okay, uh, well, having bled for this country, I can tell you that, okay, that's a noble thing. Fighting and bleeding for your country is a noble thing, but it doesn't take any special skill. It doesn't take any special leadership ability to get injured in an IED attack. It just takes being unlucky, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And she, from what, if she was highly decorated because she was in an IED attack and then she charged enemy positions and cleared trench lines and so on and so forth, that would have been written into this article, but it's not. So, by the very fact that it's not written into this article, we know that she's likely not highly decorated. I mean, like, we're talking about decorations for valor in combat, Bronze Star, Silver Star, anything like that. Now, they have not released the name of this woman, so we don't know exactly who she is. But the article goes on to lament the fact that she was so had been put in line to take over the Navy SEALs. The entire Navy SEAL, she was going to be the commander. But just 2 weeks before the ceremony, the command abruptly canceled this ceremony with very little explanation. And they believe that it came directly from Pete Hegseth at the top. And that means that this woman who's been in the military for 20 years, s- and she's been promoted to all of these sort of high ranking positions previously. Well, now her career is basically over because there's nowhere else for her to go. And I would take some issue with that. I mean, perhaps it's there's an up or out policy, but uh, if she really had something to offer and the military wanted her, they would allow her to stay in. They'd put her in a different billet. Uh, Now, the one thing that she gives a nod to here is that the Navy SEALs is a brotherhood, and they don't take kindly. Putting her in charge of the Navy SEALs is very little different than putting me in charge of the Navy SEALs. And I'll tell you right now, I'm not qualified to lead the Navy SEALs. I never went through buds, and I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't. I wouldn't dare to if I was in this woman's position and I had not I qualified as a Navy SEAL, I would never even begin to think about taking a command leadership position, leading a bunch of people who had done things that I hadn't done. That would be ridiculous. And the only reason that she was there, that's another reason it tells us, is because of her sex. So Pete Hegseth has said he is not closing combat arms to women. All he's doing is he's saying that we're going to have one standard, the standard of combat. I mean, because combat doesn't differentiate. Combat doesn't care what's between your legs. They only care what you can do, what you can accomplish on the battlefield. And the men and maybe women that you go to war with need to know that you are capable and competent to do the job that you're supposed to do and potentially be there to drag their carcass off the battlefield if they get injured. Now, I'm going to give you some personal anecdotes about this in a minute, so stick around for that. But before I do, I just want to get into the the size of today's military. Uh, the active duty force in the United States is now roughly 1.28 million troops. And that is actually the smallest military that we've had since before World War II. So you'd have to go back to 1940 to find a U.S. military that was smaller than the one we have today. And I don't need to go into the breakdown of how many of those are Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Space Force, Cyber Command, all that kind of stuff. Suffice it to say that the numbers are very, very small, and they were getting smaller by the year. See, there was a tremendous challenge in the previous 12 years, 16 years maybe, for recruiting after Barack Obama tried to basically shift the military into being a social experiment more than a warfighting force. They had a tremendous amount of difficulty recruiting new talent and maintaining good talent that they had already. That a lot of people that said, I really would rather not be commanded by a transvestite. And so I'm out. And I personally talked to dozens, if not hundreds, of troops in the field in Afghanistan and Iraq who told me that exact message in one form or another. I am getting out of the military as soon as I can because this gender confusion stuff, this uh, pronouns, we're spending so much time in racial sensitivity classes and social justice classes and all this kind of stuff that we don't have time to actually train for our jobs, which is to go out and kill people and win wars. That being the case, readiness suffered greatly. As a matter of fact, uh, the crisis that we got into kind of came to a head in 2022 and 2023 into 2024, where the active duty military recruiting goal was missed by 25%, meaning the armed services missed their goals by about 41,000 recruits in 2023. That's the fiscal year. 41,000 short. Applicants hit a 40-year low because of this. And that you could point to that and say that's another reason why they're feeling like they have to take this small minority of soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardsmen, and Marines, which are women. They make up about 17% of the military force that we have today, and they're just not getting the people, and the people are hemorrhaging. They're leaving as fast as they can, and so we're going to take women and put them in these positions that might have gone to a more qualified man, but the more qualified man bailed. He popped smoke. He got out of the military completely. We don't know that for a fact. That's speculation, and I'll be honest about that, uh, because, but it stands to reason, is what I'm saying. You could make a case that perhaps that was one of the things that caused them to promote all these women. And I would venture to say, I haven't seen the study on this, but I would venture to say that the number of women, homosexuals, transgenders, and things like that that were promoted into high leadership positions, so the flag officer positions over the past over the Biden administration, especially, was way out of balance regarding the percentage of the force that is made up by those minorities. What I'm saying is, if 17% of the soldiers that we have in the Army are women, and then you look at the number of flag officers that get promoted into those slots in the Army, and the number of women getting promoted is 38% or something, is double what the actual percentage is, then what that would prove is that they were promoting women specifically because they were women. And just from all of the anecdotal evidence that I've heard talking to people in the military, that was absolutely the case. That women were getting promoted to these positions, and minorities, other, black people, all this intersectionality. If you're a black lesbian woman, boy, you're making 4-star general, that kind of thing. I mean, like your ticket is set to the top. Now, again, I have not seen the statistics on that, and you could probably corroborate that if you dug deep enough. I just haven't had a chance to do it. But what I'm speaking from is just my personal experience, anecdotally speaking with people in the military who are active duty. Most of it off the record, right? Now, if you don't know who I am, I served for 8 years in the U.S. military, 4 years as a U.S. Army Ranger in that elite 75th Ranger Regiment, and 4 years flying helicopters in the National Guard after I got out of active duty. I was an enlisted man. I was not an officer. So, and of course, when I went to Ranger School, for example, class 3-89, uh, there were no women in Ranger School. Heck, I don't think, I mean, I was an infantryman. So at that time, there were no women in the infantry at all. And I don't, I really, I joke that I didn't know that there were women in the Army for the first 6 months I was in, because all the training I did was only males, uh, basic training, advanced infantry training, uh, airborne school, and then the Ranger indoctrination program, and then the Ranger regiment. Every step along that way, there were no women in allowed in any of those circles. So I remember clearly the first time that we were getting transported somewhere, and we didn't have our normal, like normally we had our own sort of set apart vehicles and stuff to transport us, but they weren't available or something, and we just had to use regular Army troops to transport us. And some of the truck drivers were women, and we were all like, "Holy cow! What is that?" And we kept calling them "ma'am," even though they were enlisted. They ranked lower than we did, but we're just taught you call women "ma'am," and uh, so it was just kind of awkward there. Now, as a part of my job with the 75th Ranger Regiment, every year the regiment sends a cadre of instructors, of Rangers, up to West Point Military Academy, the United States Military Academy in West Point, New York, to train their first year students, the cadets there, at a place called Camp Buckner. What they do is after the first year of West Point, the cadets have to choose a track. They have to choose uh, what area of the specialty of the Army they want to go to. So they have to choose, signal, armor, aviation, infantry, et cetera, intelligence, and in order for them to be able to make that decision, the first summer after their initial year, they spend the summer at Camp Buckner, and they do a week of every different branch of the Army. So they do a week of infantry, a week of armor, a week of and at that time, women were not allowed in the infantry, but all of them. I mean, there was one or two girls in each squad, and so they weren't going to exclude them. So they let them go through the infantry week and the armor week, even though that they couldn't actually track that way. So as I was an instructor there, I got a new squad of cadets every week, and we just took them through basic infantry tactics: movement to contact, land navigation, raids, ambushes, recons, stuff like that. So we spent the whole week out in the woods with these people. It was a week long field problem. There were no showers. There were no latrines, no toilets. Uh, the way that uh, the standard operating procedure at that time, I'm not sure how they've changed it now with women in these units, but at that time, when you take a platoon out on a patrol, an extended patrol that's going to be multi-day, when it comes nighttime, you don't like. Yeah, I mean, I imagine civilians think that we bring out our little pup tents, and we get out our air mattresses, and we get in our sleeping bags, and we bed down for the night. Maybe have one roving guard around the camp. No, we have a little campfire, and we roast marshmallows and sing kumbaya. No, that's not how that worked. You form a triangle with first, second, and third squad, and then your weapons squad, which has machine guns, heavy machine guns. Uh, I'm sorry, light machine guns, um, would would anchor each corner of the triangle. So you have a machine gun on each corner, and then you have one of the three squads in between to form that triangle. And everybody just lays down on the ground and faces outward. So this patrol base could be 20 yards That'd be a big one. Depends on how thick the underbrush is and everything. But it could be you're almost touching the feet of the guy that is facing the other way behind you, and you buddy up in pairs, and basically lay there and you pull security with your weapon, and you lay there all night long. You don't get in a sleeping bag. You take turns changing your socks. You take turns sleeping. One man's awake, one man's asleep, and you wait for daylight to come before you continue your mission. You don't sleep in a sleeping bag. If it's very cold, you might pull out a poncho liner and wrap up in it. But most of the time, we just wore like what I'm wearing here, something we used to call snivel gear. And we would just lay on the ground with no covering, no anything, in the rain, in the snow. I mean, I've laid out there at West Point when we were training these cadets. I've laid out there on the ground in the pouring rain, freezing in, it was July or something, but we were just really cold up there in the mountains of New York. So you can imagine a situation like that. If you have to defecate, where are you going to do that? Well, it's not like when you're camping where you hike off to a stand of trees somewhere and you hide behind a tree and you do your business and bury it in a hole or something like that. That's not how that works. If you have to defecate, you can't leave the patrol base. So they dig a slit trench right in the center of the patrol base, and you walk over there and drop your trousers and do your business right there in full view of everybody. Because any other way would not be tactically sound, right? You'd be people killed. What's so funny? The comments are great. You said no, no, not like that. Uh, Now, I have been on field problems with the Rangers where we did not have a shower for more than 30 days. And in Ranger school, you're going there are stints where you're doing 4 or 5 days in the woods, but then you come back to some barracks. I think the longest field problem you do might be a week. Okay, but in actual infantry units, you'll go out to the field and stay for a month. Now, if you're in a rear echelon unit, like a medical unit, our friend Diane Britson was a female who served honorably and went to Iraq and everything. But if you're in a medical unit, you've got tents, you've got toilets, you've got showers, you've got a mess tent, all that kind of stuff. We didn't have anything like that. We had a rucksack with an MRE, an entrenching tool, a change of socks, and what we called our field girlfriend, which was our poncho liner, the absolute best invention the military ever made. The poncho liner saved my life many times. Is wonderful. I still have them today because they're great. So all of that to say, when I got these squads of cadets at West Point, I would sit them down and have a little briefing with them at the beginning, and I would say, uh, "How many of you believe that women should be allowed to serve in combat units?" And all the women would raise their hands for sure. A few of the men might, but all the women certainly would raise their hands at the beginning. I mean, these are the cream of the crop. These women are the best of the best. They're the best the military has, and that's why they've been accepted to the United States Military Academy. So these are not slackers by any stretch. All of them were smarter than I was. I mean, they're smart, smart women. And they all said, yeah, women should be able to serve in combat units. And I said, okay, now I'm going to do you a favor this week, and I'm going to treat you exactly like I treat everybody else. I'm not going to give you any special privileges. you're gonna do exactly what you would do if that I would make you do if you were a man. And they all said, great, that's what we want. And to their credit, they tried really hard not to get any special treatment or not to even look like they were getting any special treatment, to the point where, you know, I walked out there one time and these girls had their shirts off, and were changed, they were just changing their shirts, but they're in the patrol base with all these men and they're pulling their shirts off. Um, and I had to go like, well, all right. We're going to put a stop to that right now, ladies. I'm sorry, but somebody's going to have to hold up a poncho or something if you're changing clothes. And they're like, well, the men don't have to do that. And we're like, yeah, I know, but we can't have you run around, freeing the nipple here in in the woods with all of these horny male cadets. That can cause a real problem. The command at West Point came to us and said, you can't treat these women the same as you treat the men. And we're like, well, what are we supposed to do? I mean, they said, well, look, we will bring out porta potties for the women. The men will use the slit trench like normal, but we'll bring out porta potties that the women can use. They need more in terms of hygiene and things like that. So they made this sort of concession to the women by doing that. And honestly, I mean, how many of you women, um, if you were in the middle of your menstrual cycle, would want to spend a month in the woods with no shower? I mean, that would be as gross as you can imagine. So that is that was the reasoning that the military gave us for bringing out porta potties for the women and giving them a little place to bathe in, some. So we had to basically declare an admin break to our field problem and let the women get up in the morning and go off over behind some trees to the porta potties and get all cleaned up, do all their ablutions over there, and then come back, and then we'd go tactical again. Well, obviously, that is going to garner some resentment from the males who are having to, crap in a slit trench in front of everybody else. So, and then you run into the issue of fraternization. There were two instances during the time that I was at West Point where cadets got kicked out of the service, like separated, expelled, because they were out on in those field problems with us, and it was nighttime. Like I said, you pair up two people every like 10 yards or 5 yards, depending on how thick the woods are. And if it gets really cold or if it's raining, you might pull out one poncho and drape it over the both of you or something like that, to try to keep the rain off. At least, I mean, we would have never done that in the Rangers, but that's what they did there. And you get a mixed company over here, and there's some sexual politics that end up going on, and some, you know, lipping and gripping under the poncho there. Some cadets playing tonsil hockey with each other, and this absolutely is immediate removal from the program. We even had a an instructor who got caught fraternizing with one of the cadets. And I personally had two of the cadets during the time that I was there, two of the female cadets, come on to me and offer their services to me, uh, which I declined. But all that to say, it's obvious that even if these women are 100% capable and can qualify to do anything the males can do, it's still going to be a problem because of the sexual politics, because of the additional logistical considerations that have to be taken into account. Separate showers, separate billets, um, gynecological services. The medics have to carry medicines and things that they don't have to carry if it's an all male unit. So it just adds to the logistical burden, and it creates leadership friction, because now the leaders are having to deal with romance and sex and things like that and of course, if there's two women for every 10 men or something like that, uh, that is going to be you're just, without a doubt, you're going to have love triangles going on, and people breaking up, getting upset, all this emotional baggage and drama that you just don't get in an all male unit. So that creates some sort of institutional friction on those things. So in 2015, Barack Obama, his last year in office, did away with the restriction on combat arms units for women. Now, I want to make this very clear, because I realize that not everybody understands the military and they're not in the military or anything like that. So let me make this very, very clear to you. Listen to what I'm about to say. I am not against having women in the military. There are many jobs in the military that women do every bit as good as the men, and even better. Uh, Medical stuff, even pilots, to some extent, or crews on aircraft, that sort of thing. Combat arms units are units, just think of it this way: units that may at some point find themselves engaged in hand-to-hand combat with the enemy. So that would be infantry, armor, things like that. Those units were off limits to females until 2015. When Barack Obama did away with that, they immediately started pushing women into these units. Today, there are about 4,000 women who are serving in combat units in the U.S. military. And that's a minute fraction of the total number of people in those units. So you could probably say the total number of infantry and infantry armors, mortars, whatever, artillery, uh, would be in the maybe a couple 100,000 people total in the military today, maybe 300,000, something like that. And there's 4,000 women total between active duty and National Guard serving in these combat units. So they have to, so the incremental logistical needs, because if you've got to provide separate showers for women, it doesn't matter if there's one or 20, you still have to provide separate showers. If you got to provide uh, more medical care, things, birth control pills and stuff like that for women that you don't have for men. If you got one or if you got 20, you still have to carry all that stuff. So the aggregate additional friction, logistical friction that it brings to these units is in hugely way out of proportion to the benefit that you might get from having a woman in an infantry unit. Now, when I was at West Point, I told these girls I'd treat them the same as everybody else. So as we were on patrol, once in a while, you'd say, all right, we're under enemy artillery attack. And you'd drop some artillery simulators and they go, wee, boom, and blow up. And everybody's supposed to hit the dirt until after the explosion and then get up and run 200 meters out of the kill zone. That was the immediate action drill we were training them on. However, you can imagine that in real life, if there were artillery shells coming in, probably not everybody is going to be able to carry themselves 200 meters out of the kill zone, because there are going to be some people that are injured or killed, worse. And we can't leave those people behind. So if somebody's injured, you have to pick them up, throw them over your shoulder, and run 200 meters with them, with all their gear on, and don't lose their weapon and everything like that. We, in the infantry, in a situation like that, you don't really have time to pull out a stretcher and put 4 guys on the stretcher and things like that, because we're a very small unit. And we don't carry a bunch of stretchers and things with us when we're in the field. Nowadays they have these Skedco stretchers that roll up, and they do probably carry 1 or 2 of those. But the long and the short of it is, there you could easily find yourself, if you were in real combat, having to pick up a grown man and throw him over your shoulder and run 200 meters with him. And so when we were in training there at West Point, I would do this. I would drop the artillery simulators, and then when they went off, I would say, you guys are down. All right, let's get, let's evacuate these guys, get them out of here. So I'd point at one of the girls and say, you pick him up and take him out there. In the entire summer that I worked there, every week getting a different, 2 women in our squad, I never had even one of them who could complete that task by herself. And so sometimes I'd let them grab another woman and put, okay, let's get 2 women on this guy, and you both drag him over there, and they still couldn't do it. And again, these are not the bottom of the barrel. These are the best, fittest, most competent females that the military has. And I literally couldn't find one who could pick up a normal sized man with his body armor and his gear and run 200 yards with him. Not one. And so what that exposes is that there is a liability in having women as a part of these units. Now, are there women who could do that? Yes. I mean, if you've ever seen what's her name, Thor's daughter, uh, they're all the daughters in the CrossFit games from what are they, from Iceland? Uh, I mean, those girls are beasts, and they certainly could probably pick you and me both up and run 200 meters with them and not even break a sweat. But those are like unicorns. Women that are capable of doing something like that are very, very few and far between. And so you have to ask yourself, is it worth all of the logistical friction that you end up with by having women in there? Is it worth having the sexual politics, having the drama, and all of that? Is it worth it for the 2 or 3 females that could actually make it using the same standards as men? Now, in 2015, they didn't make women adhere to the same standards. Only the Marine Corps said they were going to do that. And so the Marine Corps uh, had a study done by the Rand Corporation on women in special operations and in the Marines. And what they found was that if the standards remained the same as they had been before the change, before 2015, and the women were held to the same male standard, none of the women could complete the crucible in the Marine Corps crucible. None. There were 1 or 2 that got close, and I think one actually just said, "I don't want to do this anymore. This is not what I signed up for, and I thought it'd be different." And she left voluntarily, and I think the other one got injured or something. But the long and the short of this study, the Rand study, is just what I've been saying throughout this piece, is that the challenges of putting women into a mixed gender unit are, they get constantly compared to all male units, and they make some soldiers feel like, well, if we got women in our unit, then our unit's just second rate. We got a bunch of women that are trying to be infantrymen here. I want to go to a elite unit that doesn't allow women. I would have been that guy for sure. The command has their time sucked away managing romantic relationships, sexual harassment complaints, who's dating who drama. The women they found tend to get injured and even tend to get post traumatic stress at a much higher rate than the men do. All other things being equal, so they get more stress fractures in their hips and their joints. I mean, it just makes sense. I mean, you get a 150-pound woman, that'd be a big woman, right? And you get a 210-pound man, and they both have to pick up an 80-pound rucksack and carry it for 12 miles. Well, the woman is obviously going to be at much more risk for injuries. And so well, that's what they found. This RAND study found that the the benefits of bringing women into units like this, and there were a few, uh, were far outweighed by the drawbacks. But the Obama administration said that we're going to do it anyway. And they desperately wanted to have women in special forces and special operations. So they started sending women to Ranger School. Now, I'll just skip ahead here. But when this happened, I mean, anybody who's been to Ranger School was just disgusted at it, right? I mean, I went through Ranger School, like I said, in class 3-89. And if you don't know what Ranger School is, it's a leadership course and that tries to approximate the stress of combat. So it's not a special operations course or anything like that. It's not spy school where you learn to, karate chop people. And I mean, well, you do learn to karate chop people. You do a lot of hand-to-hand combat in Ranger School, but it's first and foremost a leadership course named after the special operations unit known as the Rangers. In that course, when I went through, it was 61 days, and you got an average of 2 hours sleep a night, and you got one meal per day for 2 months solid. One meal a day, 2 hours sleep a night at the most. That's if you do everything right. Many days it was much less than 2 hours of sleep a night because we got lost and we missed the objective and whatever. So it's a 2 month field problem where you're out in the woods for a significant period of time. You do come back in because you have to switch locations. They do a desert phase, they do a mountain phase, they do a ours was like an Arctic phase because I went through in the wintertime. And they have what they call city week. Uh, so you're moving around, and in that time you're staying in barracks and things like that. But every man has to shave his head completely, shave his head, and you are living in the woods for 2 solid months. And I'm not saying, like I said, you do get showers now and then because you have to move around, but for the most part, you're not showering. You're walking a good 10, 12 miles a day with a minimum 40-pound rucksack, sometimes much more than that, depending on what you get tasked with carrying. And you only do it on one meal a day. So they take away your food, they take away your sleep, and they grade you on absolutely everything you do. And at the end of each cycle, each phase, you all sit around in a circle and grade each other from 1 to 12. You can't grade two people number one. Everybody's got to be 1 to 12. There's got to be a number one. There's got to be a number 12. And if you happen to be number 12 or in the lower echelon on everybody's thing, on their survey, you get recycled. You get sent back and you have to do that phase again. About 70% of those who start Ranger School end up recycling at some point. So it's not abnormal to get recycled. I was very fortunate. I made it all the way through first chance, and I was never recycled. But I knew a lot of people who did. Well, what they found as they started putting women into Ranger School was that they were getting recycled at a much higher rate, about 90%. Uh, and that says something. They had a much higher rate of injuries. They had a much higher dropout rate in terms of percentages. The the military keeps it so that only about 30% of the people who go to Ranger School pass. And I'm sorry. I think it's no, it's not 30%, 70%. 30% is the Ranger indoctrination program or the selection process for the Rangers. So if you get more people than that are graduating, they make the course harder to continue to maintain those numbers. And it is a very, very stressful course. I lost literally, I lost 40 pounds in Ranger School. I got real sick toward the end. I got dysentery. And when I got out, I looked like I had just escaped from a prison camp somewhere. It took me literally years to recover physically from Ranger School. It's not meant to build you up. It's meant to wear you down and to make you more exhausted than you ever knew you could possibly be, and then make you lead people in that situation. Thank you, Jim. It's very kind of you there. Appreciate that. Um, Make you lead people in that situation. So the first woman that went through, I talked to some of the Ranger instructors who were there when the first woman came into Ranger School, and they said they were told this woman will graduate. She will graduate. So they had to do what they could to push her through. Now, this woman was given 6 months off before she went to Ranger School, given a professional physical trainer and a nutritionist to get her into Olympics, you know, CrossFit Games shape before she went to Ranger School. That in and of itself should have disqualified her from getting a Ranger tab because nobody else gets that. Nobody else gets 6 months off. Nobody else gets a fitness trainer to get you in the best shape of your life before you go to Ranger School. I got yanked out of the field. I was on another field problem in the Ranger Regiment, and they came and said, PFC Holton, get your gear. You're going to Ranger School. And the next week, I was in pre-Ranger. Or no, the next day. Sorry, the next day I was in pre-Ranger. Okay. So this is what we've seen. There have been to date about 150 women who have graduated from Ranger School. Virtually all of them have been given months of time to prepare before they are sent. And the percentage of women who have tried to go to Ranger School and have dropped out is much higher than 70%. So it's just, look, combat doesn't get easier for you if you're a woman. If anything, it gets harder. It's harder psychologically on women because women are nurturing by nature. And so if you're in a situation where you have to pull out your combat knife and stick it in somebody's eye, women are more likely to hesitate when they have to do something like that, just by virtue of their wiring, by virtue of their DNA, because women are not made to do things like that. I've interviewed women who were decorated in combat, who actually got citations for valor in Iraq. I wrote about one of them in one of my books. And I remember talking to her on the phone when we were doing the interview. She said, listen, she was out of the military. She had been medically discharged because of stress fractures in her hips and in her shin splints. and she said, "Look, you can write this article if you want, but I'm telling you right now, I don't believe women should be allowed into combat units because it's just too hard." Now, let's just leave it at that. I've been through a bunch of arguments with you as to why I believe women should not be in combat arms units. I didn't say women shouldn't be in the military. I said combat arms units. And I'll just end with this. Nothing that I've told you so far even touches the moral component that says, what kind of a country are we if we have plenty of military age males who could go off and defend our country and do the bloody, dirty work of giving their lives like Iwo Jima and Tarawa and Guadalcanal and the Bella Wood and all those places that are now famous, D-Day, all that. That was all accomplished by men. And we have a country that has enough men. So why would, if it's not absolutely necessary, why would we want women defending our men? I don't want women out there defending me. That goes totally against the way I was raised. Now, maybe chivalry is dead. Maybe that's not a thing anymore. I kind of get that sense when I go in bed with the U.S. military or go visit the U.S. military nowadays, and there's women there, and they're cussing just as bad as the men are and everything. And I that's just gross to me. I don't think men should use language like that in mixed company. And I certainly don't think it becomes a woman to use language like that ever at all. So, I mean, that call me old fashioned, but to me, there's a moral component to this. Why would we send our women off to fight for our men and not the other way around? Now, I understand in a place like Israel, excuse me, or Ukraine, where they're under an existential threat and they don't have enough men. And so they are bringing women into combat positions. Women tend to get killed at a higher rate in actual combat, firefights and stuff like that than men do as well. They can't move as fast. They certainly, if they get into hand-to-hand combat with a male enemy soldier, she's more likely to die in that engagement. And so it's unfortunate when other countries feel the need to draft women into their militaries. Look, as I said, I don't have a problem with women being in the military. There are plenty of jobs they could do. Combat cameraman, maybe. Uh, be a journalist, be a medic, something like that. As long as it does not involve you going into combat. Now, the last war in Iraq and Afghanistan that we faced was a different kind of war. There wasn't so much a front line because it was an insurgency. So the enemy was pretty much everywhere. And that's why there were a lot of women that ended up uh, uh, in combat who weren't even in combat related jobs necessarily, truck drivers and stuff like that, because there wasn't any safe area for them to go. And that is what it is. However, what we found from that was that women claim post-traumatic stress disorder at a higher rate. So if it was the same, then 17% of the women would have gotten. Uh, yeah, I'm sorry, 39% of troops that have been overseas in combat claim some sort of post-traumatic stress. I've talked about that issue before because not anywhere near that number have actually seen combat. Just the simple fact that you got sent to Iraq and you were on a base, and maybe these bases are the size of cities, right? I mean, they're huge. Some of these bases have 40, 50,000 people on them. It's a city. And so, yeah, oh, my base got rocketed one time, and so I have post-traumatic stress. Yeah, that's not exactly like charging charging a bunker or the beaches at Normandy or something. It's not that kind of combat. They say that only 2% of the troops that were deployed actually fired rounds in anger, actually got into a literal firefight with the enemy. It's 2% of today's military. So why did 39% of them claim post-traumatic stress? Well, I think there's a very reasonable explanation for that. And that's going to have to be the subject of another live sometime because I don't have time to get into it today. But suffice it to say that 39% of the women who got uh, sent over there should have been about the number that asked for post-traumatic stress benefits or rating after they got out. But the number was much higher than that. So I'm right at an hour, and I haven't even got to any of the questions yet. And I'm sure that the chat has been super lit. I haven't been watching it because I didn't want to get real distracted. And I didn't get through anywhere near all the stuff I had here. But let me get to your questions. Robert says, I agree, but men and women have different natural skills and abilities. Wouldn't a wise leader consider in what capacity males, females would best serve? Absolutely. No question, Cheryl. You are 100% correct about that. And look, women only make a second rate man, but men only make a second rate woman. God designed us both to have strengths and weaknesses. I think he made women actually stronger than men in many ways, if not physically. And that's because so many men have, abandoned their women, and the women have to do everything themselves. So I am grateful for all of them who serve. But I still don't think that women should be allowed in combat arms units. Okay. Next question. What do you make of Trump hosting a known terror? Okay, we talked about that yesterday. So, Observer, go watch yesterday's podcast and you can see what I think about that. Klamath River Media says, I'm so confused. I keep seeing vague reports on X and some accounts on YouTube that Ukraine attacked Oriol, Russia, last night with a Flamingo missile. Can you confirm? Yes, I can confirm. Ukraine made a very large attack yesterday, or actually tonight or last night on Russia, and did use some of their Flamingo missiles in those attacks. I saw a video of the Flamingos taken off. Cheryl Miller says, why is this such a PC topic? Is not the end goal to be a strong military? Considering what capacity in which men and women best serve in the mission, different natural skills. This is what Pete Hegseth is changing the military back into now. He's saying, look, we're not going to close these units to women. We're just going to make women achieve the same standards that men do. Because if you can't achieve the physical standards that are set based on the rigors of combat, you should not be in this unit, no matter what your plumbing is. Okay? So I think that's a good step to take. Sissam Messiah says, if they train and are up to the same standards, and this is truly their dream, why not? Well, the only why not would be some of those things that I detailed in this live about the logistical friction, the drama, the relationship issues, all that. And if there's one thing about being capable up to the same standard, but again, a month in the field with no shower is going to affect a woman differently than it affects a man. You can have bigger problems with yeast infections and gross urinary tract issues and menstrual things and all that kind of stuff. So that would be the only reason I would say. Look, the military is not about you achieving your dreams. The military is about killing people and breaking things and doing it as quickly, as efficiently as possible in order to deter people from messing with America. So the more lethal we make our force, the more elite we make our elite units, the better. And anything that dilutes that should not be there. And I think women fall into that category in some cases. Cheryl says again, she got a lot of questions today. Men and women different. Fact, both genders have value in the military. Yes. Okay, yes. Uh, do combat roles require strength and size that men naturally possess? Yes, they do, as referenced by my story about women not being able to pick up a man and carry him 200 meters to the evacuation site. Tim Lab says, is there any history of women in combat that's been successful in winning battles? Sure. And women that have found themselves in combat often have performed very admirably. And they've also died. And they've also been captured and have been horribly sexually abused for years in captivity. And these are things that men probably wouldn't have to go through. And if they did, well, that's why men fight and women don't. The other thing I would point out is that, especially right now, we need women having babies. That's what we need, because we're not having babies at near a fast enough rate to even replace ourselves. And if we want America to survive and to still be America, we need more women to be cranking out babies and not chasing their dreams of a career as an Army general or the commander of the U.S. Navy SEALs. Now, I'm not saying we should be forcing women to have babies. I'm just saying that as a culture, we should be encouraging our daughters in that direction. I just did an interview that's going to be up here pretty soon with Douglas Wilson. He's an author, a Christian author, and that's one of his big mottos is love God, serve others, and make babies. So you're going to want to hear that interview. It's a great interview with him. So Joseph says, when is Pete going to transfer women out of the combat units? I think he's not going to transfer them. He's just going to say, if you want to stay, you have to meet the male standard. If you can't meet the male standard, then you have to go. That's what he's going to do. Wayne says, what do you think of Israel's solution to this by having all female units? I'm not adverse to having all female units. I just don't think they should be all female infantry units or something like that. By and large, when I go out with the IDF, the public affairs zoomies are all women, mostly women. And they serve very well in that capacity. The one, when I went to Gaza on my last trip to Israel and was invited to go in with the IDF into Gaza, the woman public affairs officer who was in charge, I was just amazed by her because she was herding a bunch of journalists, which is hard enough to do, especially since they were all from different countries. And I heard her speaking English, Hebrew, Arabic, and I think Russian, and maybe German, maybe one other language as well, all within the space of about 5 minutes to different people. And I was like, you're in the perfect job. I mean, to be able to speak that many languages, that's great. Ben says Rand Corporation, like Danny Rand, the Iron Fist. No, not Danny Rand, the Iron Fist. Rand Corporation. Uh, I see many women in the IDF. What are their standards for women in the IDF? Uh, I'm not an expert on women in the IDF. I just know that it's not voluntary; it's mandatory that women serve and men in the IDF. But I would hope that they have to qualify for any job that they're going to do. Wonder what one guy in a woman's unit would feel. Oh my gosh, can you imagine? That would be that. Boy, if that's not hell, you could certainly hear it from there. I mean, that would. Oh, just shoot me now. That you want the Whew. I'm not going to go any further down that one. Jeremy Bray says, have they changed Biden's draft for women yet? You're talking about making women sign up for the selective service. I believe they have. I believe they have canceled that. Cheryl says, again, is it true that an exception with regard to the role of a woman in a combat setting might be that of a sniper due to smaller lungs, et cetera? Does historic data show this? I know that many militaries around the globe have trained and are training women to be snipers. Women make very good snipers in terms of their marksmanship capability, but many times a sniper has to live in the field for days or weeks at a time, slowly creeping up on a place where he can take out an enemy. And that would lead to the same kind of issues that women have at a greater rate than men do when it comes to uh, living like a sniper. Now, in a modern warfare where it's not out in the woods somewhere or something, maybe you could make women snipers, but uh, you still have to infill and exfil, and you're going through combat. You probably not the best idea. To say nothing of what it might do to them mentally. How'd you have such strong self control against the two women who threw themselves on you? Well, I was seriously dating someone at the time, uh, and I didn't want to lose my job because I knew that if I touched one of those cadets, I was losing my job. So when they made their offers, I just thanked them for their generosity and moved on. Uh, Ben Frere says, "Don't you already have uh, gone to Ranger School to be in Ranger Regiment?" No, you don't. Uh, again, Ranger School is a leadership course, and it's open to anybody from the services. So you could be a intel officer and go to Ranger School. You could be a cook and go to Ranger School if you wanted to, if you get a slot. Ranger School is a leadership course. They named it after the Ranger Regiment. To get into the Ranger Regiment, you have to go through, now it's called RASP or ROPE, and the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program, RASP. And it's like I think 3 week course. I haven't looked at it recently, but it's like a 3 week course, and it's just a 3 week gut check. It's basically just all physical all the time for 3 weeks. It's like the Navy SEALs have Hell Week in Buds. The Rangers have RAS, which is 3 weeks of Hell Week, all put together. And they usually wash out about 70% of those who try. As a matter of fact, when I went through at that time, it was called RIP. Uh, they told us day one. They put us in the what they call the dying cockroach position, which is where you lay on your back with your legs and your arms up in the air and your head off the ground. I want you all to try this. I want to see how many of you will actually try this. Try doing the dying cockroach for 2 minutes. 2 minutes. So lay on your floor, put your feet in the air, put your arms in the air, and lay there for 2 minutes. And you tell me if if you think that's a comfortable position to be in. We had to stay. They put us in that position, and they said you are going to stay in this position until half of you quit because we have to get rid of 70% of you anyway. So we're gonna make it easy right at the beginning. You're gonna stay in the front in the dying cockroach position until half of you quit. If you put your head down, you put your legs down, you're out. You're done. We were in that position for 45 minutes. So I want to know if any of you have actually taken my advice and tried the dying cockroach. Okay. Tim Labs says, would you debate Tulsi Gabbard on the issue of women in combat? Absolutely. Sure would. I'd debate her on her stance on Ukraine as well, because she's wrong on Ukraine. Chuck, what carried you through difficult training? Were you a believer at that time? I was a believer, and a lot of what carried me through was the belief that this was my calling, that God would not put me in that position to fail. Uh, and in reality, I needed it. Every young man asks himself this question at some point in his young life. What do I have to do to prove myself as a man? How do I prove myself as a man? And I was 125 pounds when I graduated high school. I was a small kid and I got picked on a lot in high school. And so I looked at that and I said, if I got the U.S. Army Ranger scroll on my shoulder, that shows that I'm a man right there. You can't argue with it. I'm a man because I got that. So for me, it was almost life or death. There was no chance I was going to quit. They would have to kill me to get me to quit because I so badly needed that for just for my own ego sake. Now, I'll admit that was acting out of my weakness. And one of the things that I wrote about in my book, Making Men, was the fact that I want my sons, when they ask themselves that question of what it takes to be a man, to have a blueprint, to have a template to look at that doesn't include putting a tattoo in the middle of your face, getting a, you know, crotch rocket and driving at 90 miles an hour down the freeway, or, jumping out of airplanes just to prove you're a tough guy. We all act out of our weakness sometimes, but I wanted my sons not to have to do that. If you want to know more about that, go get my book, Making Men, and read it. Alfred's mom says Israel allows women in the military, though, but do they go into combat? They actually do allow women into combat. And I have not seen, well, actually, I do have here in my notes somewhere. Uh, in Israel, they did a real world study, and they've had women in combat roles longer and in significant numbers than other forces. IDF research comparing female combat soldiers with male combat soldiers found that female combatants reported higher stress around physical demands, social acceptance, and gender expectations than their male peers did. They described constant pressure to outperform to earn legitimacy. I would discount that just because every guy feels that too. You get to a new unit, you got to prove yourself. But if that is chronically stressful for these women, that's going to affect their decision making and long term retention. There was a case study of an IDF mixed gender infantry battalion that highlighted several operational headaches: constant comparison to all male units, command time sucked into managing romantic relationships, harassment complaints, who's dating who, ongoing debate inside the unit about whether or not they were a real combat unit or a social experiment. Individually, none of that stops a patrol, but cumulatively, it eats up time and trust and focus that should be spent on tactics and training. And then a longitudinal IDF study of mixed combat units found that unit prestige suffered significantly when women were included in the unit. And as men and women progressed through their training, their dropout intentions showed that women were more likely to drop out or more uncertain about staying. So if all things are being equal, the women had higher incidences of, number one, sexual harassment, number two, injuries, and number three, post-traumatic stress in the units. So that's the actual numbers from these IDF studies. Minnesota town, it says, can we find a way to live without a military? Yeah, we could just surrender to Russia and call it a day. Pacifism only works if there are people that are not pacifists around to protect the pacifists. Okay? The only way you can afford to be a pacifist is if somebody like me is willing to go up and shoot bad people in the face to keep them from coming and killing you, because there are bad people in the world. And until there are no more bad people in the world, we will always need the warriors to protect us. Klamath River Media says, do you know about the Edmund Fitzgerald that sunk in 1975? It was 50 years ago on the 10th. That was in Vietnam, right? I think I heard something about that just recently, actually. Mike Silva, which branch of the service would you recommend women to enlist in? I would say enlist in the Air Force, Space Force, Cyber Command, or maybe the Coast Guard. Cheryl Miller says Ranger School is very difficult to pass. Yes, it certainly is. Ranger School was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my whole life. Which training is more intense, Force Recon, Navy SEALs, or Rangers? I'm not the guy to ask because I think they're all equally terrible. And I think if you could make it as a Ranger, you could make it as a SEAL. If you could make it as a SEAL, you could make it as a Ranger. There's obviously a lot of inter-service rivalry between the different services. The bottom line is the highest level of special operations unit should be male only because the physical demands are just that high. Didn't IDF females fight off an attack on a kibbutz on October 8th? No, a lot of them were overrun and taken hostage, actually, and a lot of them died. There was an all-female unit, but they didn't fight off the attack. They fought against the attack, and they definitely slowed the enemy down some, but in the end, almost all of them were killed or captured. But they were doing good work as intel analysts, but they shouldn't have been out there without more men. Georgia's Garden says, were you ever to Eglin? Yes, I was. I was at Eglin for Ranger School, Swamp Phase of Ranger School in 1990, early 1990, like January, February, something like that. And then we did training down there from time to time. We actually trained for the invasion of Panama at Eglin Air Force Base. And they built a full-scale mock-up of the places that we were going to hit. And we flew in. No, I'm sorry, that wasn't for the invasion of Panama. That was for Operation Desert Storm. If you recall, the Iraqis had Kuwaitis that were, I'm sorry, in Kuwait, the Iraqis had the American embassy surrounded, and we trained to go and rescue those people out of the embassy. Okay, last but not least today, as I said before, I've been studying a lot about the effects of plastics on our body. It's one of the reasons why I'm trying to drink out of glass bottles now, is I'm trying to put less plastic into my body. And there's a great product called Kimchi One from Brightcore, and I want you to hear more about it. So stick around for this interview with the founder of Brightcore Nutrition. Really interesting stuff. Take a listen. Holton here, coming to you from my studio in West Virginia, and I appreciate all of you being on with us today. Today, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I want to have an interview with Kim Bright. She's the CEO of Brightcore Nutrition. I want to talk a little bit about a subject that they kind of got me interested in, and that is the topic of toxic pollution from microplastics. I've been doing a bunch of reading on this, far more than I should have, kind of going down the rabbit hole. And so I wanted to see if I could get Kim Bright on with us to talk to us a little bit about microplastics and about how she got involved with understanding it. Hi, Kim. Thank you for being on with us.
Sure.
I appreciate you doing this.
Thanks for
as I
having
was
me.
saying, I've been kind of going down the rabbit hole on the topic of microplastics, so I wanted to have you on to talk about that, as you're kind of an expert on it. But first, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be running this company, Brightcore Nutrition?
Well, I founded the company about 28 years ago. We're headed into our 29th year soon. And I got involved with nutrition when I was out in Hollywood. I was doing modeling and acting over 50 years ago. And I was partying hardy, and I had a near-death experience with alcohol, and met my maker, and came back, and my feet got put on a different path, and that was the path of nutrition. So first, I had to help heal myself and study, and I started reading everything from the 1920s forward, and attending lectures with people that everybody else said was crazy, but now they're looked up to as the real people that understood nutrition back then. And I've studied Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic and different approaches rather than Western medicine. So I helped a lot of people. I counseled over 15,000 people. I had the first non-smoking organic restaurant in Westport, Connecticut back in the 80s. Taught people how to eat in season, taught people to eat organic and locally, and also had a whole center there where I had different guest speakers in, and I actually, counseled people and helped a lot of people that, had from cancer all the way up to professional athletes and CEOs of companies. So I never dreamed that I would have a nutrition company. This just happened. I decided to start it 28 years ago and help people. And the first product was organic wheatgrass juice powder because it was so incredible to help heal people. It's got every single vitamin, every single mineral, all live enzymes, everything your body needs for a daily basis. You could actually live off of it. So it helped heal a lot of people's situations. And then from that point, Chuck, I've just grown, the line. And I've had to study so many different things to understand over the years what happened to people's health. I'd understand first and foremost my own. Why at age 20 did I, have this situation going on? So that's how I got into it. That's how Brightcore came to be. And here I am today. My son is actually the CEO. He's now running it. I, did it for so long. It's like he's been helping me since he was 5 years old. So it was time for mom to just do this kind of stuff and let him. And we've made a great team. We got a good team there. It's a family-owned business, and that's what it's all about.
How fun. Several years ago, I realized that, I woke up one morning and looked in the mirror and thought, Dad, is that you? Realized I was getting older. And, I watched my mother and my mother-in-law, my wife's mother, both really struggle after our dads passed away. And I started thinking about my own, the love of my life. And I don't want her to ever have to go through that struggle without me. And so I thought, you know what? The best way I can love my wife is to, take steps so that I can outlive her by at least one day. So I can always be here.
That's a great plan, because men do die sooner usually than the women, because you guys are usually under more stress.
That's right. And that's when they're not a war correspondent going to war zones all across the world. And so there's a lot of things I cannot control, obviously, about my job, but I figured I would do what I could to control the things that I can. And so I've really, like I say, jumped down the rabbit hole in the whole longevity and nutrition space, read a lot of common books about this, like Peter Attia and How Not to Diet, those books. And it actually caused me to, I'm something of a biohacker, I guess. So I have tried all sorts of stuff. And even now, I take so many pills in the morning that I'm too full for breakfast by the time I get done taking all my pills. What are the most important things? You mentioned wheatgrass. That's not one that I have taken. And so I'm just interested from your point of view, what is the real key for longevity in terms of nutrition?
Well, wheatgrass juice, not wheatgrass, because wheatgrass, if you take it in capsules, that's what was there before I brought wheatgrass juice out for the first time in capsules, because it's just loaded up with cellulose, the wheatgrass. So you extract out the juice and you end up with all of the things I said. And the great thing about it is almost the exact same pH as what our blood should be when it's in tip-top shape. So the pH of the blood and of our body is the most important thing, because disease grows in acid blood and it rarely grows in alkaline blood. But when you keep that balance there, which when you eat sweet wheat, the wheatgrass juice powder, that's going to keep it in that balance, because it's 7.3 pH. So that's the most important thing. And then your gut. Those two things, gut health, because your health starts in your gut and disease starts in your gut too. But you have to keep the pH right and you have to keep your gut healthy. And that's
Well,
what
that's
we talk about today.
you just added to my my load. Then I'm gonna be I'm gonna be picking up some wheatgrass powder and taking that now. So as you know, I spend a lot of time in war zones around the world, and this is kind of what got me on this was reading this article about microplastics in war, and war always leaves a mess: craters, oil spills, toxic smoke, you name it, because it's all about destroying, and so it just blows things up. You blow them into the atmosphere. Now we're learning, though, that modern warfare leaves something else behind, and that's microplastics. And the I thought that it would be just localized, like if you're somewhere near the front lines, maybe you're going to be inhaling toxic smoke or something. But from the reading I've been doing, these microplastics get blown up into the atmosphere and they go everywhere. And so the war that's happening in the hundreds of missiles and drones that Russia's firing at Ukraine, they might as well be firing them at the whole world in some sense because
That's right. That's right. Because those microplastics spread throughout the upper atmosphere. They spread globally, Chuck, and they affect everyone. They're found from the Antarctica up to the Arctic. So they are everywhere. And what's interesting, too, that I found with this article is that the main killing thing is the drones. And so they're using a lot of drones. And those drones are connected to fiber optic cables. And they're only used one time. And then they're abandoned in the fields. And they leach into the soil. And what I found interesting, I wrote it down because I wanted to remember it. Those drone cables, those fiber optic cables can be up to 134,514 feet long. So then what happens is we have, animals, mammals, bats, birds getting caught up in these things, just like the fish and everything in the oceans where all this, stuff is floating around too. But this is so important to understand that it takes over 600 years for these things to degrade. And so you see this toxic aftermath of any war zone is going to have a significant global impact on health, not just for humans, but for all life. And every time fuel is burned, like a missile is launched or a bomb is detonated, the microplastics are released into the atmosphere. And these microplastics are spread everywhere. They're found, in every breath that we take. They're found in 94% of the U.S. tap water, bottled water worldwide, 88% of our meat, our seafood, and other protein sources. And do you know that cadavers, they've studied cadavers, and they find that the microplastics plaque that are discovered in these cadavers, they're 450% more likely to die from heart attack or stroke. So that's for us to understand. When we're getting this amount into our body, we up the ante of us being able to have heart attacks, more heart attacks, because these plastics, they have jagged edges, they get in, they love fat, so they go into make plaques in where the fat is that's lining all our different blood vessels. So this really causes a problem, and they're also devastating our ability to retain muscle mass, even impact our bone density. So what is this doing? It's making weak, brittle men, weak, brittle women. So, the other thing too, which is really important for the guys out there, it's affecting your reproductive ability and sperm count. Do you know that the sperm count in teenage boys right now is only 50% and the testosterone is only 50% of a 65-year-old man? That's the lowest ever.
I've read that. Yeah, we've actually done a podcast about that as well. I mean, that's horrific. I mean, that's not a small correlation here. That's catastrophic.
Yes.
So what's actually happening inside the body? I've read about the fact that, like you say, in these cadavers, they're finding the equivalent of like a plastic spoon in your brain. That's a little concerning. What makes this stuff so dangerous in your body?
Because they're nanoparticles. You can't even see them. And there are bigger plastic, which are still very small, but they also, the electrical currents that they give off for some reason attract other toxins, heavy metals. So not only are they coming into your body, the microplastics, but they're carrying all this extra baggage. And then they get in, and as I said, they come in all different sizes. They have jagged edges, so they're ripping, tearing, gathering together, making
Just causes inflammation.
causes inflammation, and inflammation ups your ante for having heart attacks, because these plaques that are inside the blood vessels can burst. And then now you've got all these things scattered all around, the fat particles that have all these other things. And microplastics are also altering our DNA, because they're causing DNA damage. They're changing gene expression. They're interfering with DNA repair mechanisms. And this is concerning because it's a known risk factor for diseases like cancer. So when people think, well, how do I avoid or what do I do? Well, just avoiding or limiting the use of plastic's not enough. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm not going to drink out of bottled water, plastic water bottles anymore, or, microwave my food in a plastic Tupperware dish. But that's not even scratching the surface. It sounds
No,
like
that's not
you
scratching
can't
the
avoid it.
surface. Yeah.
So how do you even begin to reduce that once it's inside you? I mean, is there a solution?
Yes, hopefully there. I mean, I will only tell people problems when I have a solution for them. I don't believe in adding more to, what's already there. But the thing that I want people to understand is you have to take active steps to remove these toxins from your body before they do irreversible damage. Now, BPA is one of the most common plastics, and that it's been found through studies is degraded by Bacillus pumilus. Yeah. Bacillus pumilus is only found in kimchi. Kimchi is a couple centuries old fermented food from Korea, which has just proven itself time and time again. There's vast data on how incredible kimchi is. And there's also a 2025 study that showed 2 other lactobacillus strains that are found in kimchi as well. And what they do is they have biofilms on them. These particular ones that they found out of studying 754 different ones, that these really pulled into these biofilms. They absorbed and excreted the microplastics in vivo. Okay, that was Bacillus parkasii and Bacillus plantarum. Now, these things are also in kimchi, these bacillus different strains. And the key to avoiding toxicity and maintaining your optimal physical condition lies in your gut microbiome, as I said in the beginning. Because from the day we're born, we have a war going on in the gut. And it's a battle of good guys versus bad guys. And kimchi, the way that I view kimchi, and I've been talking about kimchi for ages, it's like special forces. It's like, the Army Rangers or the Navy SEALs. And you've got
It's just without all the cussing.
That's right. No cussing down in the gut. That's right. But, you can send in other things that will help, combat these guys. But when you want to really get your gut in good shape, you send in the special forces. So kimchi is antimicrobial. Now, what does that mean? Antiviral, antiparasitic, antifungal, antibacterial. And so the kimchi really wages that war down there against the bad guys. And 70 to 80% of our immune system's in our gut. So when you have a strong immune system, you're fighting against viruses. People don't get sick as often. You travel a lot. People, you're exposed to all kinds of things, viruses, funguses. So many people have overabundance of candida that they just can't get rid of. Kimchi goes in, kills that off. Parasites that infest us, and then those guys die off. So kimchi's shown time and time again the power to battle all these harmful microbials naturally and effective. And what's interesting is it also fights obesity.
So it's not just microplastics that it takes care of. It clears up industrial toxins or, like you say, even, parasites or things like that.
Exactly. That's why it's such a superfood. That's why it's king of the fermented foods. You can eat sauerkraut, you can eat pickles, you can eat, kefir or yogurts and things like this. They're not going to do what kimchi does. And, there was a preclinical study, and do eat them because all fermented food's great, but kimchi's the king. There was a preclinical study that showed that the kimchi diet, when you include it every day, reduces body fat by 31.8% in this study. So, nothing that's in our control determines our health more than what we put in our bodies, Chuck. And that's why we created Kimchi One.
I tell people all the time, I have often counseled people on fitness matters, and I always tell them that if you're only focusing on exercise, you're fighting 20% of the battle. The 80% of the battle is what you're putting into your body. And if you're not, you can't out train a bad diet. So you're going to have to get your diet fixed. However, you're making me sad because kimchi is gross. I don't like kimchi.
Well, that's why we made Kimchi One. I was able to put it in a capsule because so many Americans, they fall off their chair when they smell it or
I
when
know it's terrible. Wait, so how did you do that? I mean, obviously you've got some kind of wizardry
I took
that
my
you
magic wand and
yeah, right.
did it that way.
No, but how do they make kimchi one? How is it made?
Well, you have to, this is our little secret. And but we got it made in America where we have the kimchi made, and then we're able to, through different processes, keep all the beneficial things that are found in kimchi and the live active, enzymes, the live active, or not enzymes, the live active probiotics, the, the vitamins, the antioxidants, everything that's in there. And we've been able to put it in capsules for daily use. So you don't have to deal with the odor. You don't have to deal with, the taste. And when you make homemade kimchi or you buy it in a store, it's very high in sodium. So people that are on low sodium diets can't have this incredible food. So we were able to extract out the majority of the sodium. So it's very low in sodium. And then it's 100% made in the USA, all natural, non-GMO. And we use a cold process drying to get it down to that. But we've had so many success stories about Kimchi One. People that had problems with their digestion, their regularity, their immune system. They used to get sick all the time, better energy levels, better skin and thicker hair. I mean, people were bloated all the time, no matter what they took. They had so much success taking Kimchi One.
That's fantastic. So you're offering my viewers, Hotzonians, a special deal on Kimchi One. Tell us about that.
Well, if they will go to mybrightcore.com/Chuck, they'll get 25% off with the code Chuck, and or they can call in for up to 50% off and free shipping.
Now, so it's better to call.
It's better to call. I've been educating people for over 50 years now, and so I want you to call in. We have people that can answer your questions, make sure this product's right for you. So call 888-927-6882. That's 888-927-6882. And the first 100 callers, Chuck, we're going to give them a free bottle of vitamin D3 plus K2s in there as well. Again, that's 888-927-6882.
All right. Well, folks, you heard it from the CEO of Brightcore Nutrition right there. I'm sold, so I got to get me some of that. I got to be in the United States long enough to get a package in the mail, but
we'll get you some. We'll get you some. How about that?
All right, it's fantastic. Well, and maybe we'll get you a Hot Zone T-shirt for your.
Oh, I'd love it. I'd love it, and thank you for your service, by the way, too.
Well, thank you. I appreciate. Uh-oh. Put me back in there. Who's that? Who's that right there? Oh. So, just as an extra bonus for you, I just will let you gaze on these two gorgeous grandkids. And now you know why I flew all the way to Armenia. Hey, you be sweet. Where's your monkey? There's your monkey. You don't want your monkey? Are you tired? Mhm. So, thank you very much for watching the Hot Zone today, folks. And I am looking forward to more great reporting tomorrow because we're going to be talking more about what's going on here in Armenia. And then we're going to be off to Ukraine in a day or two, and we'll be bringing you on the ground reports from as near the front lines as we can get in Ukraine. So stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get alerted when we're about to go live and you won't miss things like this. Yeah. Right? Right? All right. See you guys. Take care.